Is If J.K. Dobbins is back, should you be ready to start him right away? What do you do with Paris Campbell or Alec Pierce if Michael Pittman can't go? And is Michael Thomas back to his pre-injury form? Plus, the FFPC main event, Week 1 overall leader Alex Elkins joins us to discuss Corduro Patterson's big game, when Rondale Robinson will be startable this year, and much more. We've got a great show for you. Farrell Elliott is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
Damn the pressure, I've seen greater men than me, the lesser.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now watching the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com with your hosts Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott.
Solace in the scripture, are we not all our father's sons? I became a man, nobody ever told me what a man was.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Rob. Greetings and salutations to all you Bulkaholics and for LEX. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. I'm your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman, and my co-host is the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, Farrell Elliott. Coming up on tonight's show, we'll wax poetic on whether Chase Edmonds and or David Montgomery should be in your starting lineups this week, which fringe top 12 tight end needs to be flexed out for week 2, and the week 1 leader in the FFPC main event, Alex Elkins, will grace us with his presence as we grill him on Mike Evans' poor week 2 matchup, Juju Smith-Schuster's bad game last night, and much more. If you want to connect with us on Twitter, feel free to do so. We encourage that type of behavior here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. You can connect with us. The show is at HSFF Hour. I am at Eric Balkman, and always learn more about Farrell's Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at KFFSC.com. You can also check him out on Twitter at JFarrellElliott and the KFFSC out at KFFSC. You can post on our Facebook page, facebook.com/HSFF Hour. You can email the show at highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. If you have any questions for myself, for Farrell, for both of us, for Alex, now is the time to send them. We'll try to get to all the chat room questions, tweets, and emails in the fantasy feedback segment coming up later on in the show. Thanks to our audio engineer and my best friend Bryce and our mutual friend Rob. I will bring over into the show right now the co-host with the most, and we will see if he is recovered from Vegas. Farrell, I see you are back in the homestead of Louisville, Kentucky. Vegas was good to you, my friend.
You know, it was good to me, Balky, and I enjoyed every minute. I was there, not there for a long time, but there for a very good time. And since we're talking about it, I'd like to say something that to you that is held in the hearts of every player that plays in the FFPC is your contribution and the way you worked during that weekend. I watched you. You weren't available because you were busy doing something that had to be done. And I was impressed at the way you moved through that ballroom, the way you worked with the guys from the Better Sports Network. I was beginning to think there were 2 or 3 of you doing all the work, and that doesn't include Don Erickson. So thank you, Balky, for your contribution and making that weekend what it was.
Listen, it's players like you that make it so much fun and make it possible. Just to recap Vegas, what a time it was. Mm-hmm. We had live events going on basically all day Thursday. We took a little bit of pause to have the live watch party going on at Planet Hollywood for the Buccaneers and the Rams, and it was awesome to see everybody out there. Ran into so many people. I can't remember who I was telling this to, but I just walked to get some food or to get a drink, and it would take me 45 minutes because I'd run into so many people that either I haven't seen in a year or I've never met before. And then we'd hang out, we'd talk football with them. It was a tremendous experience. All day Friday we had drafts, and then Friday and Saturday got a chance to hang out with Kyle Elfrink, and we covered the FFPC live events on the Better Sports Network, which shameless plug there. We have a show on there. The FFPC has a show called the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, not to be confused with the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. That airs Wednesday nights, 10 to 12. It's myself and a rotating guest every week. We've already had on Jack Miller from Establish the Run. We had on Matt Schaub from Draft Sharks. We had Brian Drake from the Fantasy Football Hustle this past Wednesday. Next week, we're having Devin Knotts from Football Guys. So it's always fun. It's 2 hours. We get to break down waivers live as they come across. So make sure you're downloading that Better Sports Network app, available on Google Play and the App Store as well. But Farrell, thank you so much for the kind words. I had a blast. Vegas was awesome, as it always is. And I'm just glad everybody had a good time, seemingly. I haven't heard any bad parts. I just wish you could have stayed longer, but I know you had family duties to get back to on Saturday and Sunday.
Yes, sir, and I was well received upon my appearance at home. They were glad to see me. So, I won on both sides.
All right, excellent to hear. Well, some teams won and some teams lost in week one, and it wasn't just the NFL, it was fantasy players as well. I want to get into some of the Fantasy Flash news before we get to our guest in about 9 minutes or so. Pro Football Network's Aaron Wilson is reporting Rondale Moore is unlikely to play week 2 against Las Vegas. Now, before the season even started, the regular season started for the Arizona Cardinals, Rondale Moore had a hamstring injury, and it was not just like a first degree, or not a first degree. It wasn't just a casual sprain. It was a serious hamstring injury, and he might be out longer than week 2. Now, when you talk about Rondale Moore being out, you get excited for Marquise Brown, get excited for Zach Ertz, maybe AJ Green. But the guy who led the Arizona Cardinals in catches, targets, routes run, and snaps was Greg Dortch. Yeah, that's right, Greg Dortch. Pretty unbelievable stuff. Farrell, I don't know if you picked him up anywhere in the FFPC this past week. Are you a believer in Greg Dortch in week 2 if Rondale Moore misses again, which looks like it's trending that way?
Well, thank you for asking that question, Balky. As you well know, I am imbued with support for the underdog and the little guy. And I am thrilled that I can exert compassionate empathy for this player's involvement in the league. But, this player is a 5'7" wide receiver who played in a blowout loss, 9 targets, 7 catches. He had his career game in his first game. I remember him in the combine, and, he was a very humble player looking to get a start in this league. COVID interfered with that for him. A Wake Forest product, which Carolina could not use, despite the fact that they were the only team that brought him in. He has competition amongst all those other players you mentioned, and he has a problem within his own team of, one of the Dizzle's discovery of Andy Isabella. So no, this player has accomplished something wonderful by making an NFL team, and the coaches that gave him that opportunity need to improve the play of everyone except Dortch, because they may not be there to see the season out with him there. But, Balky, the guys that chose him, within them lives the longing of great hearts, and I'm honored to compete with those guys.
Exactly.
They're giving the little guy a shot, and I love it.
And which is great. I mean, that's what we want to see. I myself did not pick Dortch up in any leagues. I might have a couple of bids in him for like $1 or $2 in Kentucky tonight, but I don't know. I know I didn't pick him up anywhere on Wednesday for sure, but we shall see what happens there. Let's get to a more serious discussion, and that's the Ravens backfield. J.K. Dobbins, full participant in Thursday's practice. I believe he was a full participant again today. And this is good news because he practiced Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. It sounds like he is going to be ready to go week 2. Kenyon Drake was the guy who sort of took over for him with the majority of the touches in the Ravens backfield, and it wasn't really great. Now, J.K. Dobbins, we've talked about this on this show. This is a guy that I know a lot of players avoided in fantasy leagues because they're unsure of this knee. We saw Ian Rappaport make the announcement that the Ravens weren't sure that they were going to be able to start him in week 1, and Dobbins, clapped back on that. And then look what happened. He was out for week 1, but it sounds like he could be back week 2. I guess the question here, Farrell, is would you be willing to start Dobbins right away when we don't know what kind of a workload he's in for on Sunday?
If you drafted this player, you were all in on him, because right before him went more capable running backs, and right after him went more capable running backs, all of them healthy. What I don't like about this player is there's a discord between the front office, between the coaches, between the training room. Nobody can agree if he's healthy. And there's other running backs there that have gathered to grab one last chance at having a career. You mentioned Drake Davis is also there. They had a nice little workout and broke a sweat against the New York Jets. Lamar threw for 3 touchdowns. Good for him. If Dobbins was being protected for a breakout game later in the season, that was the one to keep him on the bench. Dobbins owners, I tip my hat to you. I am not one. And I wish you well with your decision, because I know when he sees the field, you're going to play him.
I have him in one league, and it is a dynasty league, and I have some pretty good running back options there, so I'm probably going to avoid him. I wish I should try to find his start-sit percentage, but it's not great this week as far as what people are projecting for. I'm sort of with Farrell on this. Like, if you got a good deal on him, then you could probably afford to sit him. But if you drafted him as your number 2 running back, you're probably trotting him out there in probably a less than optimal matchup. Even though it's at home, it's a tough Miami defense he's going up against. So I would recommend, if you could stay away, please do. But you may not be able to do that. Last night, what a game it was. The Chiefs and Chargers. This is what I want to see from the AFC West this year. Good football, heavily competitive all the way through. One of the stars of that game for the Chiefs was Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He gets 8 carries for 74 yards. One was a 52-yard carry late. But he also got 4 catches for 44 yards. Now, the 118 yards that Edwards-Helaire totaled last night, that was the 4th most in his entire career. Edwards-Helaire, I don't know if you saw that late play, Farrell, you probably did. I was waiting for him to take the ball and switch it into one hand and then go into sprint mode. He just kept it like this the whole time, like he's a fullback, plunging through the end zone. And it seemed like he was a little lost there. It doesn't matter because he
wasn't giving that ball away. You know what that head coach does to players who fumble. He was not losing that ball.
And I guess the thing that's probably most, I mean, we've been talking up Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but probably the most concerning thing here, if you are an Edwards-Helaire owner, he got 0 touches inside the 20. Jerick McKinnon got 3 touches, including a 9-yard catch for a touchdown. And McKinnon also got a 2-yard carry from the Chargers 3. Now, overall, Edwards-Helaire had 12 touches to McKinnon's 6. But if you look at what McKinnon was getting in the red zone, does that give you pause here? Edwards-Helaire, this is back-to-back good games, but I feel like this past game against the Chargers maybe was made on that fluky 52-yard run at the end. And I'm just kind of curious your thoughts. How is this split going to go, Edwards-Helaire versus McKinnon? Because certainly these players were not drafted the way they were touching the ball this game for Kansas City.
Okay. Well, I don't think anything was fluky about that run. It's late in the game. They gave him the ball. He used a fast cutback effort to get into the secondary and run past the blitzing linebackers and get big yards. It's just funny the way he carried the ball. So I'll give you that. I think Edwards-Helaire has earned it. I like what he's done. I would be enthused about the future of this player. And yes, this ball is going to be shared by a lot of players in Kansas City Chiefs, but in most situations, they're going to score more than 27 points a game, and they're going to start scoring it in the first quarter instead of the third quarter. I would be encouraged if I was an Edwards-Helaire owner. Balky, I can't remember, was it 7th, 8th round that he had fallen that far at the live event? And, so if you have him, you have just one more player in your arsenal to play in week 3 that you probably thought you were drafting a bye week fill-in.
I think this is, it's so funny because when I was drafting in Kentucky, I feel like I was loading up on these receivers, and the running backs that were always available to me were Eli Mitchell and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I got a couple of shares of Mitchell, and I was like, that's good enough. Like I should probably get more Edwards-Helaire. And now I'm liking that for now. Long season. I mean, we're basically one game into week 2. We'll see what happens there. Speaking of week 2, Michael Pittman officially listed as questionable. I've been trying to find out if he practiced today. I know he did not practice yesterday. Frank Reich said that he's optimistic that Pittman's ready to go. And this was a midweek downgrade, which I always hate. He went from a limited to a limited on Wednesday to a DNP on Thursday. If he does go, hey, great, you play him, no problem. If he does not go, Farrell, this is a great matchup, granted on the road, but it's against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We know Alec Pierce is also officially out. Alec Pierce is with the concussion. What about Paris Campbell in this spot? If Pittman can't go and if Pierce can't go, I think you got to find a spot for Campbell in your flex spots, right?
Yeah, I think you do, and it's borrowing a term from baseball. It's Johnny All-Staff. You're going to use that whole receiving core to try to make something happen. So it's a good opportunity for players to step up that are on that depth chart. It's a good opportunity for the tight ends to step up. Nyheim Hines is a player that I'm interested in. We understand that this player can line up anywhere on the field and get things done. Much as we've been promised that with Tony Pollard, we've also been promised that with Hines. And I think to win this game in the way that the Colts want to win it, they'll have to have that kind of contribution. A heavy run game and a heavy pass game for the running back. You've got a quarterback that can make it work. But, man, there's no player that I have a great ownership percentage of than Michael Pittman. And as we approach the main event, I saw Michael Pittman going off in the second round there. He became too expensive for me when he moved out of the middle of the third. But in all my earlier drafts, Pittman's there, and I hope I'm not left with a decision to move him to the bench.
I'm with you on Pittman. I ended up grabbing him in a lot of spots in Kentucky, and I did notice that he was creeping up in the FFPC main event. Again, tight end premium, 2 flexes, and all of a sudden you see Michael Pittman going in the second round there. People were very excited about drafting him this year for sure, and I know they're excited about playing him in week 2 in a great matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Similarly, let's talk about Alvin Kamara, because I don't believe he practiced. I know he didn't practice yesterday. I don't believe he practiced today either. This according to Mike Triplett, his Twitter account. He covers the Saints. This is a guy who went from a limited practice on Wednesday to a DNP on Thursday, DNP on Friday. He's dealing with a rib injury, so that sounds more like a pain tolerance. But again, I'm just speculating here. This is interesting here because obviously if he doesn't go, you're not playing him. But Farrell, where does the value come in from a fantasy standpoint? If Kamara can't go on Sunday, who are we starting to take his place to get that production?
The passing attack of the New Orleans Saints was absolutely off the charts this past weekend. And I believe that what they don't get from Kamara in an intermediate short yardage game, we're going to see the confidence that from the coaching staff in Jameis Winston being able to move from handing the ball off to working intermediate and short routes. And I would suspect that everyone's darling, the quarterback, the tight end. What's his name, Balky, the kid from BYU that
Taysom Hill.
This week, Taysom Hill. You know, I don't know his name to keep me from drafting or picking him up, because sometimes I am truly tempted. But you know, let's talk about the New Orleans Saints quickly. Jameis Winston had the best fourth quarter of any quarterback. If you get off red zone and watch the games, which I suggest doing that on Monday to watch the cut up of the games, you will see that Winston was 14 of 16 in that fourth quarter. If he has that kind of year with the 2 alpha receivers of Landry and Thomas, no question that Thomas is at the best form, or that at a comparable form that he's been at. And then what happens with the maturity around with those 2 players, Chris Olave, New Orleans can withstand losing a player like Kamara for a short time.
And it depends how well you built your fantasy teams. If you can withstand losing Alvin Kamara for a short time, I am not that good, so I am desperate. I hope he plays. I hope he plays on Sunday. I need him to play, but we'll see on that with Kamara, because I think this is something that we need to be paying attention to. Another thing that we need to be paying attention to is what tonight's guest has to say, ladies and gentlemen. He's been playing fantasy football for about a decade and a half, only recently got into the high-stakes tournaments. This is his 3rd year in the Football Guys Players Championship. This is his very first year in the FFPC main event. He is one half of the combo that is leading nearly 4,000 other teams in the main event heading into week 2 of the season, partnering with his stepfather, Gardner Parker, who put up nearly a 220-point performance in week 1 as they took the lead for the $1 million grand prize. Please welcome onto the show, ladies and gentlemen, Alex Elkins. Alex, the leader of the FFPC main event. Welcome aboard, man. Thank you for showing
up. Hey guys, thank you. Happy to be here.
So this is interesting because the photo you sent me, you have a lovely, striking, masculine mustache, and now it's gone. Where's the mustache?
I'm doing I like to call this the reverse Balky here. You know, your picture's on all over the place, nice and clean shaven. You tune into the pod and you got the great beard going. So
yeah. The reverse
Well,
bulky is
doing
not
the
a bad.
reverse.
It's not a bad fantasy football team name as well. So thank you. So listen, Alex, when you are not leading the FFPC main event, hopefully you haven't spent the $1 million yet. There is another 16 weeks to go in the season. But when you're not leading it, what are you doing for a living, man?
Yeah, no trophies for winning week 1, but I work in finance in Houston, Texas. So basically, I'm a spreadsheet monkey. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And Alex, what do you have your air condition turned to in September in Houston, Texas?
We're on full blast right now.
You're blasting it out.
Another 90+ degree day with 100.
God bless you. You know, in the heat of this summer, I drafted one team. I tried to think about what I did that was comparable to your experience. And I drafted one football guy's team that was not a slow draft because, you know, as a slow Southerner, that's how I like moving. Those drafts were made for me. But on July 4th, didn't have anything to do, decided I would draft online. It was fast draft. I was very, very unhappy with the team at the end. I felt rushed in making my decisions. Out of all my football guys' teams, that team scored the most fantasy points this past weekend. How did you walk away from either the computer or the table? Were you in Las Vegas or were you drafting from home?
We were drafting from home.
Okay. When you guys turned off the computer, you and Mr. Gardner Parker, how'd you feel about it?
I mean, kind of similar to you. You know, you do feel a little rushed in those drafts.
And now he's in first place. I love it.
Yeah, but picking from the 6th spot, I think that always makes it a little bit easier. You can devise a strategy a little bit easier. Kelsey's probably going to be there if you want to start with Kelsey, and if not, you got your pick of 3 or 4 top wide receivers. So we did go with Kelsey there in round 1, and then we're able to kind of round it out and do that Chiefs stack that paid off really well in week 1. I think we got Juju in the 4th and Mahomes in the 6th. So we were happy with that element of it. I think one complaint we'd have is not a lot of kind of young running backs there that are going to pop up at the end of the season, but you got to get your upside one way or another. And we drafted Saquon and Michael Thomas. So that's another way you grab those guys who, been injury prone, had some bad years, and hope that you catch them on that season where they get back to their true form.
I should mention too, this is Alex's only FFPC main event team, and it's in first place overall. So impressive stuff there. I got the draft board up here that I'm looking at, Alex. So now the way that Gardner was making it seem when we were exchanging emails, he made it seem like you do all the waiver wire work, the lineup submission, the draft, and you just bounce ideas off him. Is that sort of the partnership?
Yeah, basically. He's kind of he's a bit of the bankroll and the sounding board there. So we definitely talk throughout it, but I do the brain work. We'll put it that way.
Got it. Makes sense. Now, speaking of brain work, we're going to ask you something here. Michael Thomas, kind of a polarizing guy in drafting season. A lot of people said, "Oh, look, he looks great." I'm listening to the beat writers. They're saying he's moving well. He's cutting. He's looking like doing everything that he was pre-injury. You guys got a pretty good deal on him, I believe, in this draft. You got him, mid-5th round as the 28th receiver off the board. He gets in the end zone twice. Should Michael Thomas owners be expecting more of this going forward? I mean, obviously not 2 touchdowns every week, but this type of production. And for lack of a better question here, is Michael Thomas back, Alex?
I think you can expect Michael Thomas, maybe not 100% back, but 85, 90% back to what he was in the 5th round. That's still a hell of a deal. And last week it started a little ugly. I think he had a donut through the first half, but those 2 touchdowns help, and him and Jameis kind of started clicking there in the second half. So I think if it seems like Dennis Allen's trying to unleash Jameis a little bit more than Sean Payton was last year. I think he threw 34, 35 attempts week 1 compared to the 23 he was averaging last year. So as long as Jameis keeps slinging the ball and Slant Boy stays healthy, I think he's going to keep producing at a pretty high level.
Unearthed and unleashed as a guest host on some of our fantasy football content this summer was a guy named Dave Tripoli. And Dave Tripoli's got some very good words of wisdom, very good player. He's about your age when you say Balky, and Dave Turp, congratulations. Things are happening for him this fall that we'll let him talk about later. But one of the things he said haunted me. Every time I looked at the draft board, and I could, running back was a good fit, and I looked at Miles Sanders, all I could hear was Dave Turp saying no touchdowns, 0 touchdowns for Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders had a better start to this year, and so did his Philadelphia Eagles, scoring a lot of points. You have Sanders and Juju Smith-Schuster. Are you finding that before the bye week start, that with a good roster that you obviously have, do you set and go through the idea of who you're going to start, who you're going to set? Did you ever have Sanders in the lineup? Because Sanders would have given you more points than Schuster. And I think what we watched last night, perhaps the Schuster will be a proverbial work in progress. Your thoughts about Sanders this weekend, and what led you to drafting? Because Dave Turp certainly got in my head, and I wouldn't draft him.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think, at his ADP, I think he was just a great value pick. Like, he had been falling too far, and you saw that with the efficiency he had in week 1, 7.5 yards per carry. The guy's 5 yards per carry for his career. He's always been pretty efficient, and I'll acknowledge yards per carry can be a bogus stat sometimes, but I feel like especially the lack of touchdown hate that guys like Miles Sanders gets, and you look at Melvin Gordon his rookie year, I remember him getting a ton of hate for getting 0 touchdowns. But if you're a good running back on a good team, the way these two guys are, and you know what you're getting when you go in and draft them, you're not going to be upset. So for Sanders, Hurts is going to carry the ball, carried it 15 plus times. Gainwell's going to get passing down work. We hear it all. They're going to pepper in Boston Scott, but at the end of the day, right, he's the running back 1 on a great offense behind probably the best offensive line in the NFL right now. So on top of that, the Eagles are a team I'm excited to watch. They were exciting week 1, and I think their left tackle, Jordan Mailata, he's got one of the coolest NFL stories since Christian Okoye. So I'm just excited to see, that O-line and Miles Sanders continue to match this year.
Yeah, I think the Eagles' offense is a little bit underrated this year, and I think it's there's a non-zero chance that we're talking about them being a top 5 NFL offense at the end of the season. You obviously got a great deal on Miles Sanders in the 8th round. We're talking with Alex Elkins, the leader in the FFPC main event after 1 week of play in 2022. Another guy that I think you got a pretty good bargain on, if week 1 is any guide, Corduro Patterson. It looks like he could return big-time value. You got him at the 906, the 37th running back off the board in your main event draft. When you looked at Patterson, when you looked at all the players that were available in the 9th round there, can you tell us what was it about Patterson, about his game that you liked this year, when seemingly nobody or so many FFPC players were not giving him credit for what he put up last year?
Right, yeah. So, I do have to say, I don't think anyone, me included, was expecting quite the type of usage that we got week 1. Like, over the summer, they drafted a new guy, they signed Damian Williams, and throughout the course of last year, like, Cordero was really effective as that kind of slash guy, getting those unique looks out of the backfield and in the flats and all that in the beginning of the year. But as they used him more and more as a traditional running back, his efficiency dipped down, and I was worried about that when I drafted him, if they're going to run him out there like a normal running back this year with all this new competition that he has. I didn't know if it was going to really pay off, but that's what they did. Week 1, Damian Williams did get hurt, which probably added to it a little bit. But the Saints are a pretty good run defense, and he looked incredible. So I'm pretty excited about Cordero. He also won me my first ever championship back in 2013, his rookie year, when he had that monster run in the playoffs. So I'm excited to own him, and hopefully this continues, this usage.
Being deep in the heart of Texas, how long have you been a Deonta Foreman fan?
So I went to UT, so
I knew it.
I've watched a lot of Foreman in person, a lot of Foreman on TV, and can't not be a fan of a fellow Longhorn.
Well, we were talking about this in Kentucky at our draft, and I never broached the subject with anyone in Las Vegas, but someone said that you have to have a crystal ball to predict what McCaffrey is going to do. And I said, no, you have to have Google because he's missed 23 of the last 33 games. And that's right there. If you Google him and say missed games, that's what you get. So when you find that McCaffrey does eventually return to the bench with some ailment, will you aggressively start Foreman? Is he your guy? I think that's the question I want to ask, because I too have been a Foreman fan, and his career has somewhat been misguided, and I expect perhaps a late blooming opportunity for him. I always thought he should have more career than he's had.
Yeah, I mean, I view him as one of those elite handcuffs, and obviously you're just taking shots when you're drafting a guy like that. But
how late did you go? Did you recall how late to get him?
Oh, I think.
Well, it doesn't matter. It was late.
It was quite late. He was definitely down there on the tail end of the draft. I think round 15 is where I got him. So last year, similar situation with Derrick Henry. He's kind of an elite handcuff. I thought he looked really good. He averaged like 15 points a game those weeks that he started at the end of the season last year, and he looked explosive, kind of like he did back in Texas when we were down 30 points and they're running back draws on 3rd and 20 and letting him rack
First
up 15 yards and win the dog walker. But I think that raises a really interesting point. You know, he's one of those former Achilles injury guys. We have quite a few kind of, I would call them swing players this year, who are coming back from that injury. And it's a really hard thing to gauge because historically that's been a running back killer, right? And, you know, you got Cam Akers, you have James Robinson. I think everybody had that backwards, thinking Akers, you know, was totally healed and James Robinson was going to lack a lot of that explosiveness that he had. But I think it's been 8.5 months since Robinson ruptured his. He came back, looked incredible last week, and we all saw what happened with Akers. I think he's probably the running back 3 in Los Angeles right now. So I think that this injury is just such a toss-up.
A bold statement. Balky, did you hear Elkins drop in a little Doak Walker reference there? I mean, now there's a guy from Texas.
A
little Doak Walker reference. Yeah. You don't get that every podcast. That's nice.
And it's the first time I can remember it on this podcast in quite some time, if ever.
We talked about Walker winning the Doak. No, who won the Doak Walker? Never mind.
Okay,
we've talked about it.
We've talked. I guess we have mentioned it, but it's always in the reference of the college football award, at least in my recollection. Speaking of Texas here, Hudson Kern-Reeve, our resident Ivy League professor, he wants to know. Now, I know you're in Houston. Are you from Houston, Alex?
I am. Yeah, I'm from Houston.
All right. Well, he says, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right. He says an Abilenian says hi because he's from Abilene. Yeah. I believe I got that right. I could.
While you have Hudson Kern-Reeve, just while you have his attention, Balky, I want to slip something in here.
Sure.
Welcome him back to the show. Hudson, here it is. I wish you would have been here to get it in person, but it's very safekeeping for you. Your 3rd place finish from last year. Go ahead, Balky.
And by the way, welcome back, Hudson Reeve, to the show. As he was under the, I guess I'll just say he was under the weather for a few weeks, and he is back and ready to go. Glad to see him. Made my night when I saw him in the chat room tonight. Yes, so welcome back, Hudson, for sure. All right, so let's talk about Rondale Robinson, because this is a player that I don't know. I'm just looking at your team here. I don't think you do have him in this league. And I feel like, Alex, you have him in several leagues of your FFPC leagues this year, Rondale Robinson. At what point do you think he becomes a guy that we can look at starting or at least flexing out in the league in our fantasy leagues this year?
Yeah, well, you know, the knee injury he got week 1 certainly doesn't help. But as long as he comes back in the next couple of weeks, I think after week 9 or so, you've seen all these rookie wide receivers the last couple of years. They're cheat codes at the end of the season. They really just start exploding, and especially for Rondale and the Giants wide receiving room, it's just totally wide open. Galladay is so stiff. Somebody at training camp said he looked like a mannequin, which is hilarious. That's one of the best things I've ever heard. Sterling Shepard,
one-armed mannequin.
Yeah. Sterling Shepard, I think he just had an Achilles injury. And Kadarius Toney, who knows what's going on there. You saw what he did with that one catch he got last week, and he looks incredible. But the coaches must hate him. I think he's injured again. And the allure of Tony, it's kind of crazy. He could it's 50-50. He could be one of the best players in the league at the end of the year, or it could be completely out of the NFL, and neither would really surprise me. So I think I read a stat today, the personal stuff notwithstanding, his career is 19 games so far. He's been on the injury report for 14 of those 19 games, and in the 5 games he wasn't injured going in, he left 2 of them early with injury. So unless that changes, there's really no competition for Wandale once he's back. Richie James led the Giants in targets last week, so I think he's got a good shot. That said, it's probably going to be all Saquon all the time in New York. But if he comes back and can show us anything really, he could be a contributor down the stretch.
You talk about last year a little bit, and this is your first year in the FFPC, and you haven't been introduced to playing in Kentucky yet, although we will let you know that there's nonstop flights from Houston to Louisville. We'll get to that later. But I must ask you about this, and this is kind of like a 2-part question. Where did you earn your fantasy football chops? And I understand that you've got an NFL veteran that plays in one of your family leagues. You want to shine some light or commentary on that?
Yeah, it's a great story. So Maurice Jones-Drew is in our family league. I have 3 siblings myself. My stepdad has 3 kids of his own. So we have a couple cousins, a couple other family members in a fantasy football family league we've been doing for about 13 years now. And my stepdad and my mom, my stepdad is my main event partner here. They met. They're at some event in the wine country in California about 8 years ago, and Maurice and his wife happened to be at the same table as them. They were, getting along, chatting, and our kind of fantasy football group text started popping off with some trash talk, and Maurice was interested. Started asking about it. He loves fantasy football. Was like, I got my own talk show, and just asked, can I join the league? So of course you have to say yes to that. And this is the interesting part. This was when he was still with the Jags when they had this discussion, and he signed with the Raiders that next year. So as we're drafting, he's on the Raiders as a new member of the league. We gave him the first overall pick. He made time, in training camp and everything to make the draft. And I don't remember what his ADP was that year, but moving teams, he was in probably 6th, 7th round, something like that. But of course he's got the 101 and he picks himself, which is awesome, right?
Yeah. See, there's that crystal ball working right there.
Yeah.
Maurice is actually, his biggest regret about football is that he couldn't play cornerback because it would have given him a chance to talk more smack. He really, really in his heart is a cornerback. And how has he finished in the leagues in previous years? How has Maurice done?
Oh, I don't know if I can put this out there in the public.
Well, I think I'll go ahead and put it out there. He's just been damn awful, has he not? Is that essentially what he's done?
I can say I don't think he's made the playoffs quite yet.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Fair enough.
Well, I give him this. He goes and gets his guys, or in this case, gets himself at the 101. God bless him. God bless him. You know what? And I'll tell you this, I was never an elite athlete like MJD was, but I'll tell you this, if I was, I'd be taking myself at the 101 even after I retired, just to make sure, covering all my bases. I would definitely be doing that. So that's awesome. Great story.
Exactly.
For sure.
He explained it one time too. And he said, you can't make it in the NFL and be as successful as he was without having that kind of alpha mentality. You got to pick yourself 101.
Yeah.
But being as close to the league as he is, he has had some pretty great crystal ball picks that I take and copy in my other leagues. Like Darren Waller, for instance, he drafted him really early in 19 before he broke out, and that was a great call. So, besides the Darren Waller pick, have you ever learned anything from him or found anything out prior to your leagues that you used to your advantage? Yeah, definitely. It's especially when Raiders related, if the quarterback would get dropped and a backup would get picked up, or backup tight end, I'm like, okay, somebody's not playing this week,
Right.
Let's make moves accordingly. But yeah, he definitely, like you said, he picks himself and he picks his guys. So it is good to kind of keep a beat on what he's doing and try and copy some of that in my other leagues.
Let's get to a couple of emails here, Alex. First one comes from Rick in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I've thought about benching Mike Evans this week because historically does pretty poorly against Marshawn Lattimore. Am I overthinking it? The other guy I would be putting in for my football guys team is Jerry Jeudy. Thanks, Alex. That's Rick in Grand Rapids, Michigan. One of the things, and I'll answer this before you get a chance to, Alex. One of the things I've always said on the show, I am not a man. I am a weak individual. I am not a good human being, and I am not strong enough to bench Mike Evans for Jerry Jeudy this week. That's my opinion. That's just the way I'm built. It's the way I'm wired. It's the way I came onto this planet, and it's the way I'm going to leave this planet. I can't do it. Would you be able to start Jerry Jeudy over Mike Evans on Lattimore week for the Bucs?
I mean, if they ever had a lab, which its sole purpose was creating the perfect individual to catch touchdowns, they'd spit out Michael Thomas. So,
Yep.
Or sorry, excuse me, Mike Evans. Mike Evans. Yeah. So that's my answer there. Yeah, you can't bench Mike Evans, especially Nick Godwin.
Farrell, are you of the same opinion as us that you got to play Evans this week over Jeudy?
I am, especially with what's going on with the other receivers in Tampa and how the team did not really click offensively despite the outcome of their first game. So I think it's a great idea to start Evans. Now our emailer must have a wonderful wide receiving core if he has Jeudy on his bench. It would be curious to look at his roster another time. Maybe he should consider Jeudy over another player.
My guess is he went 0 RB and maybe 0 TE as well, especially if it's a football guy's team, I would imagine. Or maybe he loaded up on tight ends. I don't know. You can go either way on this. Ryan in Salisbury, Maryland. Was tonight's game, this is last night, an outlier for Juju Smith-Schuster, or is it just going to be hit or miss from him all season in Kansas City? Thank you for the email and for watching. Ryan in Salisbury, Maryland. Alex, I think Patrick Mahomes kind of clued us in on this before the season started. He's like, look, I'm going to be spreading the ball around, and he has. Smith-Schuster had, I want to say, like 6 for like 80 week one. Yep. Last night he gets like three or four catches or whatever it was for not very much yardage.
10 yards or something.
10, yeah, exactly. Is this what you're expecting the rest of the season, just hit and miss?
You know, I think it'll be a little bit hit or miss, especially since Juju runs some of the same routes that Kelsey does, and Sky Moore, if he ever gets a little more usage. They're all kind of those intermediate route kind of guys. But I think the way people confused and kind of sterilized the Chiefs a little bit last year was playing 2 safeties deep and, you know, not letting them take the top off on anybody. So if teams are going to do that and dare Mahomes to kind of pick them apart, as long as he's patient and does what he's supposed to do and doesn't do any of those desperation heaves that we saw him do a little bit last year, I can see in a PPR league Juju doing just fine, catching 5 to 6 balls a game and you know a touchdown or 2 here or there and doing just fine.
I think that's a very accurate assessment, Balky. And Alex, you know, they're not going to play a team that's got a pass rush like the Chargers every week. This is the Chargers. What they did in their defensive front 7 through free agency and the draft has been very impressive, and it's showing on the field. And we're going to see a different kind of defensive sets that Kansas City will enjoy playing against as we move on. So I'm still very bullish on Schuster.
Farrell, with that, I am fresh out of emails for Alex, so it is on you, my friend.
Oh, buddy, this is a question I get to ask all year, but it takes on so much importance once the season starts because we can talk about lineup. And it's not about who you're going to draft and who you're going to avoid. It's who you're going to put in your lineup this week. And I don't want to hear that you're starting Saquon Barkley. I want you to tell us about a guy that you've had some considerations with, and then a guy that everyone else will be playing that you absolutely will not.
Okay, yeah, I think to the detriment of my J.D. McKissick shares, I think my answer for the guy I'm gonna want to get in my lineups is Curtis Samuel. His usage was insane. He got 8 carries. It looked like he was almost a focal point of the offense at times. They were feeding him like I think 3 touches in a row at one point, and He looked pretty great. He looked nasty in the open field, kind of like he did back in Carolina. And it's kind of been years now since he's been healthy and effective, but as long as he's out there and getting that usage, I think he has to be in flex consideration for sure. Kind of shades of Percy Harvin there a little bit is what it reminded me of.
And what about a player that you are maybe a player that, and I always hesitate to say like, oh, 1st or 2nd round pick, because not a lot of people are sitting their 1st or 2nd round pick, but maybe a player that you think a lot of FFPC players are going to be starting this week that you think is a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of easy ones there, but those aren't fun. Like Damian Pierce, Allen Robinson, those are guys I think you might want to wait on. But I got
a good one for you. I got a good one for you, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's so
No,
good I got to interrupt because I know that you've got your Miles Sanders. Devonta Smith, are you starting?
Ooh. And yeah, I have this dilemma in a couple leagues. I think I still am. I liked what I saw from Philadelphia's offense. I think that he's going to get the ball and he'll, do a little bit more, and it won't just be the AJ Brown show. Although that's a great show, I enjoyed watching it. But if I had to pick one other guy, I think it would be, and not the player's fault here, it'd be Brandon Ayuk, just because I got to see a little bit more from Trey Lance as a passer. It's not as much Ayuk as it is Lance. I know weather was a concern there, but I didn't like what I saw from Lance as a passer in week 1. So I think Ayuk's the guy I'm going to have to wait and see a little bit more from the QB before I can feel confident throwing him in a lineup.
In looking at your main event team, Alex, here, it seems like you got some, in my opinion, some tough decisions. Right now, you have Miles Sanders on the bench. You have Tyler Lockett on the bench. Hayden Hurst and Logan Thomas, who had some pretty good weeks last week for tight ends. You have them on the bench. And then we don't know about Kamara, but Mark Ingram would suddenly become a flex-worthy type guy if Kamara misses. What's been the decision so far? Because so far it's been Kirk and Michael Thomas. Juju Smith-Schuster is obviously locked in there. Mike Evans. And then you got the Magic Cord and Saquon Barkley in there as well. Are any of those guys on your bench? Are you still considering any of them for a flex play on Sunday?
If I had a time machine, I would go back and put Miles Sanders in for Juju, like you guys asked earlier week 2. But I think we're pretty set right now. I like what I saw from Christian Kirk a lot. And you can't sit Mike Evans or Mike Thomas after what they did in week 1. So I think
you better make the right moves, because you're sitting in number 1, and you can click on your team name and we can all see your lineup. Everybody's looking up at you.
It's tough, target on me. Well, after
week 1, and I'm very proud of you, and I'll just give you a little advice. Get MJD on the phone and see what he would do.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
I think he's still in the player pool in the FFPC, so you could probably pick him up for $1 on waivers Sunday morning too. All right, so listen. Last thing I'll say before we say goodbye to you, I know MJD, Maurice Jones-Drew. I know he's trying to make it in this biz. He's, just on the NFL Network right now. He does some color commentary for the Rams. The 2011 leading rusher in the NFL, 3-time All-Pro. I know he's trying to make a name for himself. I'm willing to throw him a bone. If he ever wants to come on this show, we'd be happy to have him on for a segment. You want to pass that on to him? That's totally up to you. But I would just let him look, I'm clearly the most massive celebrity you'll ever meet in fantasy football. And if MJD wants to ride my coattails, I'm happy to have him do that for sure. Everyone is riding your coattails right now as you are leading the entire FFPC main event, heading into week 2, the chase for $1 million. Alex Elkins, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. Good luck in all your leagues, but especially this main event league the rest of the way. Thanks so much for coming on the show tonight, man.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Alex Elkins, ladies and gentlemen, the leader in the FFPC main event, and I'm sure he's dominating MJD in his home league that he participates in as well. I mean, Farrell, that's so bizarre. I know Maurice Jones-Drew, obviously, it's clear he loves fantasy. I mean, he's been on, Sirius XM, Fantasy Sports Radio. He does a ton of fantasy stuff. But to just be at some, Catalina wine mixer, wherever he was, and it's like, oh, they're talking back your fantasy. I'd love to join that league. To do that is just blows my mind. But I guess maybe it shouldn't.
You're known by the company you keep, and this Gardner Parker, who we're yet to meet, may be a very pleasant guy that you'd want to be associated with, Balky. So maybe when we have the next show, we'll have both of them on.
That would be tremendous. I would love that. And maybe when they're winning the $1 million, we'll have Alex, we'll have Gardner, and we'll have MJD on.
They'll have a financial plan for it. None of our questions of what you're going to do with the money, that would be in a whole nother show.
It absolutely would. It absolutely would. We're going to help some people right now with some start-sit questions as we navigate through the fantasy feedback portion of the show. Corey in Wallingford, Connecticut. Hey, Farrell and Balky. I went 0 RB and got some good options to fall to me. As a result, I am facing some tough lineup decisions each week. Would you roll with Chase Edmonds in Baltimore or David Montgomery Sunday night in Green Bay? Thank you so much. That is Corey in Wallingford, Connecticut. Farrell, I believe the Montgomery, first of all, I think both these defenses are pretty good, rush defenses, Baltimore and Green Bay. These are both road games for both these guys. I think Herbert looked pretty good against the Niners, and I think he's pretty good overall, and that would concern me a little bit. I know you love Mostert, but I like Edmonds a little bit more in Baltimore than I do David Montgomery going against that Packers defense Sunday night.
Balky, that is why you are the number one man in fantasy broadcasting. Now, I think our emailer here might have some investment in perhaps the Bears as a Bears fan, or maybe he just wants to watch the Sunday night game. Montgomery's got a lot of elements against him, including you mentioned the backup Herbert. He'll do better. He ran the ball 17 times this past week, and he has the weather to talk about as well. I think one of the biggest elements against him is the quarterback play there in Chicago. But we don't have to talk about what Montgomery isn't. We can talk about what Edmonds is. And Edmonds is the leading, with all that talent in Miami, Edmonds has 16 touches this past week. And it was on the field for 65% of the plays. And yes, we do love Raheem Mostert, but Raheem Mostert would need to cede to this player. Chase Edmonds, a very good player. And if it is the tough defense that he will be working up against, he'll do the same thing that the running backs did for the New York Jets, catch multiple passes. Last week, Chase Edmonds with 4 catches. Look for him to expand on that number this week. He'll reward the fantasy players who have him in their lineup.
So we're both of the same mind there with Edmonds over Montgomery. Let's go to the next one here, and it is from Kevin. Yeah, Kevin in Philadelphia. What's up, guys? Which receiver should I start this week? Brandon Ayuk hosting Seattle or Amari Cooper at home against the Jets? Thank you, Kevin in Philadelphia, for watching and for emailing. We just heard Alex talk a little bit about Ayuk and saying that he's probably holding him out in his lineups. Amari Cooper against the Jets, I would feel a lot more comfortable starting him over Brandon Ayuk this week for a lot of the reasons that Alex just mentioned, Farrell.
As you should. And, you can't postpone everything. The 49ers are now living in the Trey Lance era, and God bless them. I think it might be the fandom demise of our beloved Drew Maselli, but he struggled mightily. He'll have the excuse of the weather in Chicago. I think he also had the chance of, despite his ineffective play, of delivering a win if the defensive coaches would have quit putting pressure on Fields and tried to defend Fields in the pocket. But that's last week's game. The questions about this week's game, there's a field of thought that says that Trey Lance is erratic with the intermediate and short game, so he's going to let the ball fly to Ayuk down the field, which if you can't hit a receiver short, what makes you think you can hit him down the field? I'm rooting for Lance. I'm not a fan. Now that the draft's over, I want him to I root for all players to advance in his career, but I think we're going to have a struggling year. That brings us to Cooper, and the question is probably generated because Cooper did so little last week. But I'll remind the emailer that he drew a PI in the end zone that Hunt then turned into a touchdown. Yes, this is a type of game that we're going to see a little bit more from Cooper. Peoples-Jones with 6 solid catches last week, and most importantly, a team that's starting a quarterback that's had difficulties as a starter putting wins on the board just went on the road and got one. So there's good things happening in Cleveland.
Yeah, and I will say this, not because we're all, and Hudson Kern-Reeve also weighing in that he likes Cooper best as well. But the thing they keep in mind, you bring up Peoples-Jones, he actually almost had twice as many targets as Cooper did last week. Peoples-Jones, 6 catches on 11 targets. Amari Cooper, 3 catches on 6 targets this past week. We're both saying Cooper, but I think both of us are kind of lowering our expectations for both receivers in week 2 this week. Next email here is from Dave in San Diego. I can only fit one of these tight ends into my FFPC lineup for week 2. Is it Tyler Higbee from the Falcons or Albert Okwuegbunam coming back to Denver to take on the lowly Texans defense? Appreciate any advice you can give me. That is Dave in San Diego. Now, Tyler Higbee got a lot of targets. I thought he had a solid game on Thursday night as we were watching it in Las Vegas at the FFPC watch party. But I think this week, especially with Sean McVay's comments, saying that he wants to get Allen Robinson more involved. They need more. He used the word intentionality, I think. It's something I never even knew was a word before, but he said
California word.
Is a California word. That's why I don't know it. I'm not from California. I don't, so intentionality, that's what they're going to utilize to try to get Robinson more involved this week. I think they are going to try that. And I think it comes at the expense, not of Cooper Kupp, but of Tyler Higbee. I think Higbee's solid, but I like Okuepenam this week. I think that's the guy I would be playing here over Tyler Higbee.
This is the best question we've had so far because this is challenging in two ways. Balky, while you were working the room in your elegant style there at the viewing party, I was watching you and watching the game. And Tyler Higbee had a miserable game. He could not catch the ball. But what he did look good doing, because I think 3 drops, Balky. I think 3 very difficult drops. But he moved very well. And I was happy to see that. There's just so many targets in this offense and so many requirements at the tight end position. But Higbee gave me reason to hope just based on his athleticism and how he looked. He's a player that's no longer hurt. When we go to Uncle Albert, what we saw as they put 16 points on the board for Denver is that there's tremendous potential. And I can't say that Albert was targeted or featured in this offense, but he did come away with 6 receptions. It's very, very important for us in the FFPC. But there's a lot of guys posing as tight ends out here, especially the H-back Beck, who is listed as a running back but looks more like a tight end and actually lines up some in the slot. Plus, he's in motion. There's just a lot of things going on with this Denver team. So you need to look at the Atlanta. You need to look at what kind of history you can have Atlanta against the tight end to see how you want to handle in that Rams game. But, this is a tough question. And I think at the end of the day, you're going to get perhaps similar production, but you're going to get it in a much different way. Maybe Higbee around the goal line with a team that is likely to be in the red zone more and run it less would be your play here.
Higbee did see 11 targets last week, but as I said, I think that number comes down. I think Allen Robinson's goes up next week. Higbee only caught 5 of those targets, as you pointed out. I didn't realize the drops. My God, that's terrible. And then Albert Okuepenam, 5 catches out of the 6 targets he saw as well. So it's going to be tough to pick the right one, but hopefully both of them do well for you. Dave in San Diego, Travis in San Jose, sticking with the California state of mind here. I picked Trey Lance as my league-winning selection this year, but now I'm not so sure he's going to be one. Would you play him this week at home against the Seahawks over Aaron Rodgers getting the Bears in Green Bay? Thank you, Travis in San Jose. I'll post something from our guy ML in the chat room right here in YouTube, and he thinks that the rain, the slop, the swamp, whatever was going on in Chicago, that was a pretty big reason for what Trey Lance did. He's not letting that game affect his previous expectations of Lance. Yeah. Now, when you look at Lance versus Rodgers, Farrell, Lance obviously big upside, but Rodgers I think is in for a bounce back this week. Really difficult to see the Packers going 0-2. I think Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and quite frankly, Alan Lazard, Robert Tonyan, I think all these guys have big games. Rodgers is the play here for me over Lance.
Easy. And Travis, there's some other things that we'll advise you on. Come in out of the rain. That's one. Is good. Use headlights if you're driving at night. Don't send money to Nigerian royalty. These are things. And do not play Trey Lance over Aaron Rodgers. These are 4 tenets to take you through life that's going to lead to some success. But, hey, I'm not neutral on Trey Lance. I think that it will come, but did you want to risk your fantasy season by drafting Trey Lance? That's what I didn't understand about the drafters. But, hey, maybe he got Rodgers at a bargain price, and you'll get big.
Rodgers came at a bargain price in a lot of drafts this year.
So that's a plan, But the plan is to play Rodgers this weekend and forthcoming other weeks.
Final email we have tonight. It comes from Randy in Buffalo. Dear HSFF Hour, after investing a 3rd-round pick into Travis Etienne, I was not thrilled to see what James Robinson did last week. Should I bench Etienne now? I would be doing it for Adam Thielen. on Monday night in Philly. So that's his question. Thanks for putting this podcast out here. It's Randy in Buffalo. Thank you for the email, Randy. Travis Etienne this week has Indianapolis at home. Adam Thielen is on the road in Philadelphia. How much? Well, I should ask you this, Farrell. This probably answers the question. How much are you changing your pre-draft evaluation on Travis Etienne after what you saw from James Robinson on Sunday?
No, it's still the same thing. Etienne will have to be used more to take the burden off the quarterback to make this team successful. Robinson, I drafted everywhere. A lot of people doubted Robinson's ability to get healthy, but once they said he was healthy, this is one of my favorite players in the league. But Etienne is too. The emailer, I will remind him how he felt when he drafted Etienne. He shouted it out. And how he probably with Thielen was not an exciting thing as he drafted the 32-year-old possession receiver. Travis Etienne has we talk about a ceiling. He has the highest ceiling of a lot of players in the NFL. Be proud to keep Etienne in your lineup. You're going to see a different type of player. Don't be bothered by the fact that Robinson is on the field. Robinson is going to do his thing. Etienne will have to do it too for the Jacksonville Jaguars to be competitive. And I didn't watch that entire game from Washington, but I would say that the coaches made some mistakes. There was probably some matchup issues. Quarterback got confused down in distance. Some things conspired to keep Etienne away from the ball. That's not going to happen much this season.
I'm with you. I'm going to play Etienne over Thielen. Dave Terpoli somewhere is just, banging his head against the table. Say, why is this even a question? Obviously, it's going to be Etienne. You got to play Etienne every single week, no matter what. That's what he's saying.
He's right about that.
Yeah,
that's good.
And so we're. I guess if Turp was on, it would be a trio of votes for Travis Etienne over Adam Thielen. Ladies and gentlemen, this will complete tonight's broadcast. I want to thank Alex Elkins, and I want to thank Farrell Elliott for hopping aboard. Farrell, we will continue to follow you on Twitter and the KFFSC on Twitter, and of course, check out the KFFSC at KFFSC.com. Had a blast there again in late August. Looking forward to managing my teams this year. I got some decent ones. And we'll do this again next Friday. Same bad time, same bad channel.
See you then, Balky.
Farrell Elliott, ladies and gentlemen, the commissioner of the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship. Joining us on the program tonight, Alex Elkins, the leader in the FFPC main event after week one. Want to shout out to him, as well as Rob, my our mutual friend and our producer, and of course, audio engineer, my best friend Bryce, and of course, each and every one of you for listening, viewing, and hanging out with us once again as we get back on our Friday night schedule. We will be back next Friday at 10/9 Central. Guest TBD. However, RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown will be back this coming Tuesday. I believe we are going live at 9:30 with the Guilds. Andrew Geller will be Tuesday night's guest, so be paying attention to that. That'll be on the FFPC YouTube channel, as well as Twitter and Facebook. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, share, and get notified of all our upcoming videos when we post them here on the FFPC YouTube channel. Good luck in week 2. Remember, waivers process Sunday morning at 10 a.m. If you have any waivers you want to get in based on these injury reports that came in today. We didn't talk about George Kittle, but that dude, I believe, is listed as questionable. He came back in practice today, but he's not looking great. You might want to look at another tight end like I had to in week 1 to try to figure things out there and much more. So make sure that you are taking care of that, and I hope the ball bounces your way in week 2. With that, ladies and gentlemen, your weekend officially starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. It was broadcast live and was watched around the world. Balky and Farrell will be back next week with more analysis, more interviews, and more advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk with you again next week.
Not that I want to leave you on a somber note tonight, but one thing that showed up in my Facebook feed, you always get your updates on, friends' birthdays and what have you. And I got an update today that today would have been Mike Taglier's birthday. Mike Tagliere from Fantasy Pros, who actually passed away last October, I want to say, last September, October. It was right around about a year ago. he passed away because of COVID issues or COVID-19. And this is a guy that I think we all at some point, maybe we still were, I know I was, paying attention to everything he did for Fantasy Pros, all the podcasts he was putting out, all the great content he was putting out, and the rankings and so on and so forth. Today would have been his birthday, but he did pass away. So rest in peace, Mike. We still love you. We still miss you. And Sundays aren't the same without you on our laptops, on our phones, with all that Fantasy Pros game day pregame coverage that he had, and then of course everything he did throughout the week. So happy birthday, Mike Tagliere. We miss you, buddy.